We've reached the summer break, the halfway point in the 2021 Formula 1 season, and it's shaping up to be an absolute cracker of a year with a title fight in both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. I thought I'd rank the 20 drivers based on their performance so far. This one could get feisty in the comments, but let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Before I start, I want to reiterate that point that I just made. This is my opinion, and you might not agree, but try to be nice in the comment section about it. I've tried my best to avoid recency bias, particularly considering the results that we saw at the Hungarian Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago. But nobody's perfect, so let's get into the list. Number 20, Nikita Mazepin. For me, the worst performer I have so far in 2021 is Nikita Mazepin. Now it must be said that I think that the Russian driver has performed better than many had expected. He had a rough start to the season, with his first race lasting just 2 corners before he spun off into the barrier in Bahrain. It's quite clear that he's driving probably the most challenging car on the grid, and it's not being developed through the year, which just means that it's gotten more difficult for the driver through the year relative to the other teams. He has improved though, and his spins have become less frequent, but at the same time, he's failed to have any standout results and prove himself on the Formula 1 stage up to this point. Number 19, Mick Schumacher. Next up, I've put Mazepin's teammate, Mick Schumacher. The German driver has had some standout performances, including the latest race in Hungary, where he had battles with the likes of Max Verstappen in his damaged Red Bull car. The Formula 2 champion has a huge amount of expectation on his shoulders, but he's not had the machinery to be able to prove himself so far. Going for 2 rookies was a huge risk for Haas, and even though Schumacher is clearly a very talented driver, there's no denying that he's struggled so far in 2021. He's had the backing of fellow German driver Sebastian Vettel, and it's clear that he's learning from afar, but without having an experienced Formula 1 driver which he can relate to whilst driving the same car, he's always going to be at a disadvantage. Along with the highs of his performance in the race at the Hungaroring, there have been some significant lows, including crashes in final practice at both Monaco and Hungary, which prevented him from qualifying at those 2 events. He also had a mistake under the safety car at Imola, where he lost his front wing in the tricky conditions, plus a crash during qualifying at the French Grand Prix. So these kind of errors put him near the bottom of this list for now. There is hope for Schumacher, as he's always performed better in his second season in a category, but with that current Haas car, it's looking unlikely that the driver will be able to prove himself in 2021. Number 18, Yuki Tsunoda. Next up is the 3rd rookie on the grid in Yuki Tsunoda. The Japanese driver is expected to deliver as part of the Red Bull driver program, but so far he's been prone to making significant mistakes with many crashes over the season. These have included qualifying crashes at Imola, Azerbaijan and France, among numerous other incidents in practice sessions through the year. The issue with this, and this is the same for the other rookies I've mentioned so far, is that this year the teams face a strict budget cap, and the damage done to these cars is included within that. It simply means that these teams are at a disadvantage in terms of their 2022 car development because of these mistakes. These disappointing showings have been coupled with the Japanese driver's now infamous radio messages back to the team, which tend to be very fierce. This came to a head in Spain, where he insinuated that his and Pierre Gasly's car were different, for which he later apologised. This rocky start to his Formula 1 career has meant he now has less than half of the points of his more experienced teammate. Tsunoda has a great opportunity to learn from Pierre Gasly, a driver with experience at the sharp end of the Formula 1 grid, but it feels like the Japanese driver is already treading on thin ice, given the Red Bull Junior team have 3 talented juniors waiting in the wings in Liam Lawson, Yuri Vips and Jehan Daruvala. Tsunoda has taken a step in the right direction in more recent times, and his performances have started to improve, since his 7th place finish in Baku triggered a string of points finishing positions. So I expect to see him improve as we go into the second half of the year. Number 17, Kimi Raikkonen. Next up, in 17th place, I've put Kimi Raikkonen. The Finnish driver is in his 19th season of Formula 1, which is an unbelievable stat. But it has to be said that he's now in his 3rd season with Alfa Romeo, and his performances have been on the decline relative to his teammate. On qualifying pace, Raikkonen is behind, having outqualified Giovinazzi 3 times, while the Italian driver has outqualified the world champion 8 times. This is not a whitewash by any means, but it does highlight the fact that he isn't able to get the ultimate pace out of that car as well as his teammate can. In the races, Raikkonen has shown glimpses of brilliance and has scored 2 points for the Alfa Romeo team. and really he should have scored more if his Imola result hadn't been taken away from him. So there's no denying that his racecraft on his day is top notch, and he does sit ahead of Giovinazzi in the championship standings. But incidents such as his last lap crash with Sebastian Vettel in Austria cast a doubt over his season so far, in my opinion. Number 16, Daniel Ricciardo. Next up is potentially a controversial pick, but I've put Daniel Ricciardo in 16th position. The Australian driver has made a move over the winter period to go from Renault to McLaren, and so far he's struggled to match his teammates' performances in the same car. There was a huge amount of expectation on the 7-time race winner's shoulders as he switched teams for the second time since 2018. He made the move to take a step up the order as he saw more future potential with McLaren than he did Alpine, and so far it's proven to be right as he sits ahead of both Alpine drivers in the standings. But his gap to Lando Norris is 63 points, with the British driver on 113 and Ricciardo on 50. This gap after 11 races is pretty disappointing, and not exactly something that many Formula 1 fans expected going into this season. It turns out the McLaren car has a quirk that both Sainz and Norris hid well throughout 2020, but it has been difficult for Ricciardo to get to grips with. Generally speaking, drivers ask for around 5 races to get up to speed in a new car, but this year things have been slightly different and Ricciardo remains off the pace compared to Lando, with the Australian driver being around 5/10 off his teammate in qualifying at the Hungaroring. Alongside this, he's only been able to beat Norris in the races on 2 occasions in 2021, which was in Spain and Hungary, where Norris failed to finish. So really, he's only beaten Norris in equal conditions on 1 occasion. A disappointing start for the experienced driver, with an awful lot of work still to do. Number 15, Nicolas Latifi. Latifi next, and he sits 15th on my list. He has a real challenge at the moment, as his seat is under threat with the Williams team revealing that they may well look elsewhere for 2022, as they no longer need the money that comes with the Canadian driver. This makes the second half of the season even more critical than ever for Latifi. He's done okay so far this season, but his qualifying record against George Russell is still absolutely atrocious, as he's failed to beat the young Mercedes-backed driver in qualifying. In the races, Latifi has done better, and it was at the Hungarian Grand Prix where Latifi drove well, maintaining 3rd position in the race during his first stint, and capitalising on the chaos to come home in 7th position, scoring his first points of his Formula 1 career. More performances like this will put him in good stead, as I'm sure Williams would benefit from keeping one of their drivers going forwards from a development perspective. This is of course assuming Latifi offers the kind of feedback that the Williams team will need in 2022. Either way, the second half of the year is critical for Latifi. Number 14, Antonio Giovinazzi. It's Antonio Giovinazzi who takes 14th spot on my list. The Italian driver is doing well relative to his more experienced teammate in qualifying trim. He has struggled to convert this qualifying form in the races, with just a single point from the race at Monaco being his only reward. But he has been consistent in being just outside the points-paying positions at many races through this year. Based on his qualifying form, I think we could see Giovinazzi having a stronger latter half to his season as he continues to fight for his Formula 1 seat, which remains under threat from the other Ferrari Academy members such as Callum Ilott and Robert Schwartzman. Number 13, Lance Stroll. In 13th, it's Lance Stroll. I would say that the Canadian driver has done okay this season, but hasn't impressed me like he has done over the last couple of years. He's had a good few performances coupled with some disappointing ones, hence he sits mid-table on this list. Stroll has achieved more points scoring positions than his new teammate Sebastian Vettel. However, he's generally been in lower scoring spots, whereas Vettel has pulled the Aston Martin car to the podium. At the same time, luck hasn't necessarily been on the 22-year-old's side, with his brilliant drive in Azerbaijan being cut short by a tyre failure. Over his 4.5 years in Formula 1, Stroll has gained a reputation for being a driver that can achieve a podium finish in a midfield car, as he has done for Williams and Racing Point. He's also been recognised as a driver that can perform well in wet weather conditions. Take his performance in Turkey last year, for example. So it was all the more disappointing when his first corner antics in Hungary left him diving aimlessly down the inside, ruining 2 of his competitors' races and ending his own. So Stroll's season has been one that's gone somewhat under the radar, and for the second half of this year I'm sure he'll be hoping to be able to follow in the footsteps of his teammate and find a way onto the podium in his Aston Martin car. Number 12, Valtteri Bottas. Next up is Valtteri Bottas. Bottas's performances this year have been poor by his own standards, particularly given he's driven for the Mercedes team for almost 5 years now. As the second Mercedes driver, his job is to be in the mix at the front, consistently beating the second Red Bull car and being there or thereabouts to put the pressure on the lead Red Bull challenger. Instead, this year, Bottas at times has been way off the pace. Before his crash with George Russell in Imola, he was close to being lapped by his own teammate and was running in 9th position. Later in the year in Hungary and in changeable conditions, Bottas didn't even make the first corner before he took out 3 of his rivals. These kinds of performances in the wet are really unacceptable for a Mercedes team that's in a real battle for both world championships. He also had one of his worst performances at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where he never looked capable of challenging and once again failed to make his way through the field despite being in a car that should be able to do so. There have been occasions where Bottas has done well, and he's achieved 6 podiums across the 11 races so far in 2021, including a season-best second-place finish at the Austrian Grand Prix, and this is why he doesn't drop too much further down on this list, in my opinion. He's also had some bad luck. Take the machined wheel nut at the Monaco Grand Prix, for example, but to be behind the McLaren driver of Lando Norris in the World Championship standings at the halfway point of this season is poor for a Mercedes driver with his amount of experience at the team. Number 11, Sebastian Vettel. Vettel up next, and certainly early on in 2021, it was looking like the same disappointing form that he showed in 2020 with Ferrari was continuing through to this season. But he's turned it around as he put in a string of good performances from the Monaco Grand Prix, including a podium finish in Baku, and another podium result in Hungary, which was later taken away after he was disqualified. These sorts of performances are more like the Sebastian Vettel of old, and if he keeps up this second quarter form, he will move up this list come the end of the year. But on balance, I think 11th is probably about right for the Aston Martin driver at this point in the year. He's driving a car which is not at the same level as it was last year, but he's still finding a way to deliver some top quality performances. Number 10, Esteban Ocon. The newest Formula 1 race winner is next, as Ocon takes 10th on this list. Ocon's had a brilliant start to the 2021 season, and certainly in the first 5 races of 2021, he was outperforming his new world champion teammate, Fernando Alonso, as the Spanish driver got up to speed. But then, the Frenchman signed his new 3-year deal with the team, and things went off the boil. For the next few races, Ocon was nowhere to be seen. A mechanical failure in Azerbaijan and a crash through no fault of his own in Austria bookended a series of 4 races in which Ocon failed to score a point. But over the last 2 races of this half of the season, we've seen a rebound as the Alpine driver has scored 2 points at Silverstone and then even managed to take the race win in Hungary after that chaotic Grand Prix. If Ocon keeps this form up, he will have the best season of his career so far. He's already secured his long-term future in the sport, and right now, based on his form, you can't say that he doesn't deserve it. Number 9, Sergio Perez. Perez sits in 9th for me, and it's been a tricky start to the season for the Mexican driver, as he's racing in the second Red Bull seat, which historically has been occupied by drivers that have failed to be even close to the pace of Max Verstappen. Similarly, Perez has struggled in that seat and is losing the qualifying battle between the 2 drivers by 10-1. On average, he's been around 0.4 of a second behind the Dutch driver on qualifying pace. It's tricky to judge given he's being compared with one of, if not the strongest driver on the grid right now. But it's these disappointing Saturday performances which then puts him on the back foot for the Sunday races. He has, of course, achieved 2 podium finishes, winning the race in Azerbaijan and being there to pick up the pieces after his teammate suffered a tyre failure. A race win is something that hasn't been achieved by any of Max Verstappen's teammates for a long time, and it's this performance that puts him in a good place to hold on to that Red Bull seat for next year. He'll need to improve going into the latter stages of 2021 if he wants to confirm that, but he has been the best of the options since Daniel Ricciardo left the team in 2018. Number 8, George Russell. Next up in my list is George Russell. The Williams driver continues to drag the absolute maximum from his backmarker car. He's reached Q3 on 2 occasions already this year and has only failed to reach Q2 once. To have such a huge gap to his teammate is also astonishing, and it's something that he's managed to maintain throughout this season. It means that Russell puts himself in the mix at the start of every Grand Prix, Sure, he generally falls backwards and ends up being more like where the pace of his car should be, and perhaps that's something that means he isn't higher on this list. Extracting the maximum performance from his car on Saturday is all well and good, but if your car doesn't have the race pace, you'll always drop back. What it does mean though is that Russell is generally there to capitalise when the drivers ahead of him slip up, and this is where he's finished 12th in the French and Great British Grand Prix and 11th in the Austrian Grand Prix. Russell did achieve his first points with Williams in Hungary, scoring 4 points after an 8th place finish. This is a great result for the driver, and I expect that now luck is more on his side than it has been. He'll continue to push for extra World Championship points before he potentially moves up the grid to a stronger team for 2022. Number 7. Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso next, and the 40-year-old driver has already justified why he needs to be on the grid, and is absolutely not just a has-been who's returned to the sport. Alonso's on form, and after a few races to get used to his new car and the new team, he's been delivering for Alpine on a regular basis. Alonso has failed to score points on just 3 occasions this year, one of which being his retirement in Bahrain, which was only due to debris ending up in his cooling system. Other than those, he's been scoring points, including a strongest result of 4th in Hungary. His performance at the Hungaroring when defending from Lewis Hamilton has reminded us all of why he's a double world champion. He already has a reputation for extracting the most out of his car, and this is continuing in 2021. Fernando Alonso has rolled the dice for 2022, as many drivers have done, and if the French team do deliver a car in which he can win races, I believe he'll make it happen. Number 6. Carlos Sainz. I've put Ferrari's newest recruit in 6th position, as Carlos Sainz has proven that it was a justified move for the team to swap out Sebastian Vettel. Sainz had a great opportunity to get up to speed early on, as he was able to test an older Ferrari car around Fiorano. The Spaniard's performances this year have been fantastic. He's consistently achieving top 7 finishes and has even scored 2 podiums for the Ferrari team. Even when he qualifies outside the top 10, he's also capable of clawing those positions back on Sundays. Despite being ahead of his teammate in the World Championship standings at the midway point of this season, I believe he's not quite been on the pace of Charles Leclerc, which is understandable given the Monegasque driver has far more experience with that Ferrari team, but a great start for the season for Sainz. Number 5. Charles Leclerc. And in 5th place, I've put Sainz's teammate, Charles Leclerc. The pair for Ferrari have been absolutely fantastic, and thinking back to my rankings of the driver pairings before the start of the 2021 season, I think most people would now agree with me that Ferrari have the best driver pairing on the grid. Leclerc has been unlucky this season. He's managed to put his Ferrari car on pole on 2 occasions and has been unfortunate in positions where he could have scored well. In Monaco, his qualifying crash meant he failed to make the start of the race and missed out on his golden opportunity to take a race victory around the streets of Monaco. He's also lost out in Hungary after being the innocent party, getting hit by the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll diving down the inside into turn 1. But that second incident will likely cost him in the latter stages of 2021, given he lost that engine. But with a bit more luck, he could well push himself and the team back up the order in the latter stages of the season. Number 4. Pierre Gasly. In 4th position for me, it's Pierre Gasly. There's one word to sum up Gasly's performances so far in 2021, and that's consistency. He's taken a midfield AlphaTauri car to the podium already in 2021 in Azerbaijan, and has been particularly strong in qualifying, where he's only failed to reach Q3 on 2 occasions in 2021. Not only this, but once he's into Q3, he's been in the top 6 on 8 occasions. This kind of form is so impressive to see, and he must be getting at least considered for a seat at Red Bull once again for 2022. Number 3. Lewis Hamilton. Moving into the top 3 positions now, and for me, Lewis Hamilton sits 3rd on the list of top performers in 2021. The world champion sits on top of the championship standings in what probably is the 2nd fastest car on the grid this year, but unlike his normal form, Hamilton has had his ups and downs in 2021. Early on in the year, he won 3 of the opening 4 races, but things went off the rails in Monaco as he struggled all weekend, qualifying and finishing 7th that weekend. You then have his error at the red flag restart in Azerbaijan, where he ended up off the track and dropping back down the order after hitting the wrong button on his steering wheel. An opportunity to really put the pressure on Verstappen had gone begging. Overall, Hamilton will need to step it up in the second half of the season, as even though he sits on top of the standings, he's definitely not been the best performer in my view. Number 2, Lando Norris. In second place, I've gone for Lando Norris. The British driver is having his best season yet, as he scored 3 podium finishes and was even on a 15 race point streak until the Hungarian Grand Prix, where he was taken out by Valtteri Bottas. Norris has well and truly dominated his new teammate, Daniel Ricciardo, and is ensuring the McLaren team are remaining in the fight for third place in the Constructors' Championship. Of the races he's finished, Norris has been in the top 5 finishing positions in all but one of his races so far, and he's looked assured throughout this season and more confident than ever. I think the British driver's goal will be to go one more and aim for the second step of the podium rather than continuing to match the 4 third place finishes that he's achieved in his career so far. But regardless, based on the season so far, Norris has established himself as one of the best drivers on the Formula 1 grid. Number 1, Max Verstappen. And finally, the best driver of the first half of the season in my opinion is Max Verstappen. In all 8 races that he's finished without a damaged car, he's finished either first or second. The driver lost out in Azerbaijan due to a tyre failure in a race which he would have won, and he lost out in an incident with Hamilton in Silverstone, having led the Grand Prix on the opening lap. In Hungary, he was taken out as a result of Valtteri Bottas' first corner incident, which left him without a barge board, and with a car that didn't have the levels of downforce needed to get him back up the order. So really, without some incidents going against him, he could be streaks ahead in this World Championship. I expect him to come back stronger in the latter stages of this season, and if Red Bull continues to develop that car and Mercedes don't, he will surely end this year as Formula 1's newest world champion. So that's my ranking of the 2021 F1 drivers over the first half of the season. Which positions do you agree with, and who would you move? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like rating and subscribe for more videos like this one in the future.